Hi, everyone. I'm Kelly Pokies Burke, and this is the Career Slay podcast. Imagine the impact we could have on society if everyone loved what they did. That's what Career Slay is all about. I'm interviewing people who love their jobs and asking them how they got there and what they've learned along the way. We're here to slay the fear in career. My next guest is the highly acclaimed Erin Sarofsky, probably the most famous person that I know. Erin Sarofsky is the creative visionary well known for creating gorgeous, innovative main title sequences for blockbuster movies and television series like Captain America, The Winter Soldier, Guardians of the Galaxy, Shameless, Community, and many others. In 2009, she launched her company Sarofsky in Chicago's West Loop, where she serves as executive creative director of an ever-growing team, working with not only entertainment partners, but also advertising titans like Apple, Verizon, and Jeep, leading their most artful storytelling projects. Erin earned her BFA in graphic design and an MFA in computer graphics from the Rochester Institute of Technology and has been nominated for a Primetime Emmy Award. She is a frequent guest speaker at universities as well as large-scale industry gatherings. And on top of all of this, she's also a mom. If you are just getting started in your career, this episode is powerful. I love how Erin shares how she built her company one step at a time. We also discuss the challenges and biases she's faced as a woman in the creative industry. Erin gives us such real advice about the importance of putting in the time early on and building a foundation for your career. And finally, we open up about how our ambitions and careers rely on having our partner's support. We couldn't do it without them. This is such an honest and inspirational conversation. So without further ado, let's dive in. Welcome our next guest onto the Career Slay podcast, Erin Sarofsky. I'm super excited to have you on. Erin, you're a legend.
Oh my God. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be talking to you. I've been listening and it's really inspirational.
Oh, thank you. Oh my gosh. I feel like you're going to have so many inspirational nuggets to share.
Oh, I love the word nugget.
Nuggets. Oh, yeah. Now I'm hungry. All right. Well, let's dive in. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you were like as a child? Let's start from the beginning.
Yeah. So as a kid, I was very artistic and I was always playing with crafts and drawing and just kind of immersed in that. I was also I think it was like kindergarten or first grade where my mom was always arguing with my teachers because I was very stubborn. And it was if I said it was white and it was black, in my head, it was white. And there was no arguing with that. Though I like to think that I've gotten more open-minded as I've gotten older.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you were this creative child. Mm-hmm. Where'd you go to school?
So I grew up on Long Island, pretty quickly left. I graduated and went right upstate to school, Rochester Institute of Technology. And for anybody that doesn't know New York, that's 7 hours away. It's practically Canada. I left.
Uh-huh.
And I went to a technical school. Well, they had an amazing design program and I studied graphic design and photography, but focused on graphic design, and then stayed for my master's degree and got it in computer graphics, which back then was a combination of interactive and animation. So it was macro media, Flash and Director.
Flash.
Yeah. And then on the other side, we're learning a little bit about After Effects and a little 3D and Alias Wavefront. And at that point, I felt like I had to pick a path, and I really liked animation because it was narrative and nobody could touch it. I didn't have to worry about how anybody interacted with it. I don't know how those designers do it. Well, what if they touch here? And it's that breaks everything. Don't touch there, So I just like the narrative component. And I think coming from a very strong photography school and they had a decent film program that, I don't know, I just was very, very into that. Seeing my design move was a whole new thing. And there weren't very many companies doing it. It was also in the early 2000s. So I graduated in 2000. And that's when the desktop computer actually could start doing things. So that was the blue and white G5s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so we could start doing things in After Effects, animating. And so I kind of came into the industry right at its explosive kind of starting point.
So just to take a step back, how did you know you wanted to get into design? Is it because of the creativity?
Yeah. So I went to school. I didn't go to school for fine art. I went to school for design because I felt it was a career or profession that people paid designers to do things, where fine art, I was I don't know, am I going to make money? Now I would totally encourage my daughter to go into fine art. I think that would be a very beautiful profession to go into, but I very much was thinking like, what are you going to do? Like, what are you going to work at? What is your career going to be in? So yeah, graphic design, and then making it move after that was like, okay, laser focused. But I went to RIT because they also had a very strong engineering school, and I was like, okay, well, that's always something to do if I decide I don't feel like
engineering backup major.
Yeah, it's like it's an interesting thing, but like I think people that are artists, and were really strong at science as well. So for me, that would have been a natural pivot.
It's the balance of the right and left brains.
Yeah.
So what did you do after college?
After college, I landed pretty much straight away at Digital Kitchen. They had just opened an office in Chicago, and I had sent my portfolio, and the big creative director in the Seattle office saw it and really responded to it. Back then, you like printed books out, and you had a CD, interactive CD-ROM, and I still remember it. It was a beautiful piece, and I think based on hand skills alone and just basic design, I got the job. And they didn't like pay me anything practically. So I came out here, I was just like, yeah, I'll take the job. Like I didn't even think about negotiating or anything like that. I was just like, this is where I want to be.
That's awesome. So how long did you stay there? What did you do there?
Yeah, I started out as just like a junior designer. And by the end, I was a creative director. I was acting as a creative director, although they wouldn't give me the title, even though they would be like, this is our creative director, Erin. On the phone to clients, they still like wouldn't give me the title internally. And so I'm like, I've been like this creative director outward facing for a while. It's time. And they were like, well, no. And I was like, okay, it was time to go.
And what did you do after?
After that, I was a creative director at a company called Superfad, which doesn't exist anymore. I moved to New York, and I really liked Superfad. It was a great company, but I just didn't like living in New York. I really missed this life I built in Chicago. I was here for 6 years, and I had a cute condo, and I had the car, and I had a dog, and I was just used to this like very urban metropolitan life, but still with some kind of life stuff. And moving to New York, it kind of strips all that life stuff away. And I was like, I'm a grown up. I don't want to live like a college student. And so soon after I got there, I was trying to kind of think of a way to leave, even though I was very satisfied at work.
Yeah. And so after Superfad,
that's when I wanted to come back to Chicago. And I spoke to a couple people here. Tracy Bernard, who's a rep in town, she gets people work. She was like, oh, I can get you a couple things here and there. And, that's where like it kind of began. I just started kind of peddling my wares, and with her, it was crazy because you're going from working on these big, huge title sequences and great commercials like Super Bowl commercials to like making end tags for Easy Mag. But I couldn't make those things, not because I didn't have the talent, but they take teams and teams of people to create that level of work and technology and space and all of that stuff. So for me, it was perfect to get back to Chicago, to have somebody that believed in me, to let people know that I was here working, and didn't aspire to be as big as we are now. I didn't really have a vision for what it was going to be in the future. It was just a now thing to get me to the place where I resonated with the people I wanted to kind of be with.
Let's talk about the early stages of Sarofsky. What were some of the challenges you faced?
The early days were just like so fun. When I look back, it's like kind of going to college for the first time, because when you get a job and it has an okay budget, like there's so much money to go around, you're not paying insane insurance or payroll. Everything is like, I could either afford to pay my freelancers or not. So it was very kind of easy. The challenges were maybe just like, where's the next one going to come from? But I didn't have a huge payroll. I didn't have rent or mortgage or anything like that. So I wasn't so worried about it. I also didn't have a family that I had to be accountable to. It wasn't like I had 2 kids in college and it was like, how am I going to pay for this? If this works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But I'm having fun and it seems like it was working. And I had that golden touch where everything I did seemed to like take me to the next thing. And the people that liked working with me, my clients really liked working with me, and I really liked working with them, and they kept working with me. So it seems like there were no problems. You know? Looking back, I'm sure there were at the time things that I was stressed about.
Let's talk a little bit more about how you scaled it from being just you to now starting to grow a company.
Yeah. One at a time. I think people say like, oh, it grew organically. And I'm always like, I roll, whatever. They probably got a couple $1,000,000 from somewhere and that ultimately owns the company. But that's not what was the case here. Like it was, I was like, oh, this really shouldn't be in my condo anymore. I should look for a space. Like if I want to sleep or I'm sick, like I don't have any options but to have people in my house all day long. Also, like my condo board was probably going to start getting on me about it at some point soon. But yeah, so I just looked for a little space and then it became clear I needed somebody to like help me with operations. So the first person I hired was this woman, Hallie, and she was kind of like my office assistant, but then, slowly she like helped me develop payroll and helped, like we both learned together how to like build this company. Now I met her through my accountant. So it was always like whenever I had a question, I went to my accountant and my lawyer and they pointed me in a direction. And then I like grew it, like, oh, how do you start healthcare? Where do you go for payroll? What do you do? After Hallie, then I hired an executive producer and I hired a couple designers. And
when did you feel like it was time to like get a space?
I feel like we were outgrowing it. We had every desk was filled and I like people that have space. I'm not like an on top, it's like open floor plan, but everybody should have like a nice work surface to be able to do their thing and a nice kitchen area and a nice table. So I like open spaces. So
I love this space. It's so cool. And I love your wallpaper.
That became like a COVID habit for sure. Some people like took up cooking. I learned every wallpaper vendor on the planet.
So let's take a step back. So now that you've kind of built this company, you're the ECD, the executive creative director for Sarofsky and the founder of it. Tell us a little bit more about, in a super simple way, what do you do as an ECD?
Yeah, I mean, I basically guide the team and the clients towards making good design decisions. It's kind of simple. Like I'm not hands-on anymore. There occasionally will be a time where I want to play, but it's really being an advocate for my artists and a resource for them and an advocate and a resource for my clients.
Yeah. What have you learned now kind of being the leader of the organization?
I think the biggest thing I've learned about owning a company is that the company is the most important thing because it is an organism and a life form all itself, and it is supporting so many people at this point. So if something is unhealthy and it's unhealthy for the company, like you have to take care of it. And you can't just let it fester. With kindness and courtesy and all the things, you got to like either remove it from the situation or change the situation because it will kind of turn into unhealthiness all around. So a kind of weird thing to say, but I've started thinking of the company as a living thing that you've got to nurture and nourish.
Yeah.
And then from there, I can then be nurtured and nourished, and my artists can be nurtured and my producers. So
it's like a baby.
It is. Yeah. Well, I mean, like when you think about money, you need good cash flow. Okay. Well, you can't take that highly creative job that pays nothing then. Oh, but I want to. It's so juicy. It's amazing. Like I, as an artist, would want to work on that, or it's a friend's project and I want to do it for them because it's a great film and it's a great cause, but it's going to be unhealthy for the studio. Or if it's time for somebody at the studio to move on and they're not leaving, but they're at that place in their career where you could tell like it's just time for them to go and they're unhappy. You don't want that unhappiness to spread. Like you have to be like, it's time for you to move on. So if you can't do it, like goodbye. You got to let it go. Yeah.
So you've built, gosh, such a name for yourself in this industry. What has been your formula for success?
Start by naming your company your name, I guess. I mean, that was kind of an accident. I just needed to pick a name very quickly. Again, I wasn't thinking very long-term about building a brand, but my name became my brand. It's really interesting. Like there was a day at the studio where the phone rang and somebody answered it, Sarofsky. And for the first time, it wasn't weird. And I was like, oh, maybe this is the moment.
You didn't say present.
Yeah, it wasn't like, oh, that's me,
Well, let's talk a little bit more about you as a woman in this male-dominated industry.
Yeah.
How have you navigated that and what sort of challenges have you faced?
I don't think it's overt sexism that I face, but there's biases.
Yeah.
And there still are biases. And early on in my career, it was definitely more prominent. There were definitely jobs I know we didn't get because the clients couldn't relate to a woman. being like the director, especially live action. There is still for sure a bias there on that. I think with design, they're a little bit more open-minded about a woman leading design. It's like you say that like it's not like it shouldn't be a thing, but it is a thing.
I've worked in the design industry as well. Even in the advertising industry, it's so hard to find a female director, or there's just not enough of them, you know? So you being at the top of your organization, it's important.
Yeah, it's really important. I think, you know, I'm inherently not like a great self-promoter. And I don't think in general women are great self-promoters. I think they're great at lifting other people up. It's forced me to like put myself out there and show up so that people can see a woman that owns a company and directs and works on all these big things, and then they can then see themselves in that place. Because reflecting back, like I didn't have like a major female creative director or lead at any of the places I worked before Sarofsky.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. I look back and I can say I definitely experienced sexism, like, or bias. But when I was in it, I had no idea.
Wow.
You know, I was just me doing the work, wanting to do the work. And that's all that fueled me was the work. I was very blind to it, but I was always just very self-motivated. And I think like for me, rejection does not dissuade me like at all. In fact, I think that's maybe the biggest thing I've learned or is a natural trait about me that's really helped me be successful is, you know, for every job you get, there's like 3 that you don't. And when you're a young artist, for every board that goes into production, there's like 20 that don't. Like I lived for the ones that did. And I knew that like it was possible. So I was always chasing the yes. And then even when you get the yes and you get the job and you start the job, the first thing you do is send something and they give you feedback.
Yeah.
It's all the no's start coming in. And then you keep working and you keep working and you keep working. And eventually something goes out and you're like, I made that. But you made that with all of this rejection attached to it. So if you're a person that focuses a lot on rejection, this is probably like a brutal industry for you because it's just got feedback on top of feedback on top of feedback. The thing that you want to do and you want to make, even though it's on behalf of the client and they're commissioning it, it still has to serve their needs.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. No, I love that. What I think is really interesting about your approach is how you, even though you understand that it's a business and the client is the one who commissions the work, you still have so much passion for the work and like respect for the art form that's actually what drove your distinctiveness in the industry.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really lovely thing to say. So I'm going to write that down and put that on the front page of our website because I believe that that's true. I think it's really creating ownership for everybody.
Yeah.
So like creative directors and directors are like elevated to this status and they like, it is my project. But for me, a successful project is when the client is proud of it, it shows it off. When the agency is proud of it and they show it off. And when every individual on my team feels like they should put it on their website to show it off, because that means everybody owns it. It has a piece of themselves in it. They all own it. They like own it in a big way, but then also my client loves it and they own it.
Clients love to win awards too.
Yes, they do. They sure do.
Yeah. So I love that idea of, you know, multiple ownership and everyone really having skin in the game to build the best work, which is awesome. So looking back, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
Probably to have kids earlier. So being like 45 and having a 5-year-old is hard.
I get it. I've got a 2-year-old. I'm tired all the time.
All the time. Yeah. That might be a real answer, but I don't know if having a child earlier would have been good for my career and allowed me to have the energy I needed to like really put it all in. Yeah. Because it really needed it, you know?
Let's talk about that a little bit more. So you became a mom.
Yeah.
While you had this amazing company and all guns a-blazing. How'd you make it work?
Well, for a little while, it didn't. It was just kind of a mess, you know? It was a lot of, you know, in the moment dealing with what was on fire. You know, like I wasn't very healthy after I got a little sick. Like my pregnancy was great, but I was sick after. So I was managing that. And anybody that has a newborn just knows, even if it's like easy, it's not easy, and you're not sleeping, and it's just complicated time in your life. So it's like both beautiful and complicated. And I was sick, and there was a lot going on at the studio. And I think for me, the big thing that I really, really learned at that time, especially on the work side, was to like let go.
Yeah.
To really let people do their jobs and to trust that it's going to get done and that if they need you, they will ask you.
Mm-hmm.
So at that time, I really learned like, okay, your team is here to support you. Your network is here and they will make sure everything's okay for you.
Wow. I had a very similar experience with my, cancer and baby and all of that stuff. And people show up when you ask for help.
Yeah. But you got to do that work before.
Totally.
So, and you got to show up for other people too. But it's so nice to just be lifted a little kind of through it. Because, for everything else, like what we were doing, the lifting,
Yeah. So do you have any advice for young designers starting out?
Yeah, I think my advice for young artists and really anybody just starting out in their career, I would encourage them to think about it as like building a foundation for a house. There's like a lot that's going to be supported by what you're doing here. So look for opportunities that have mentorship, look for opportunities that have experience with the kind of work you maybe hope to be doing in the future. Don't just look at it for like what the paycheck is. And there's a mindset, it seems right now with this newer generation, it seems to be rooted in like this gig economy thing where I work a little bit here and I get some money and then I can change it up. But like, if you really want to build a base of a career, it's not so much about pivoting and moving every 2 seconds to find like the next best shiny thing or the next thing that's going to pay you a couple dollars an hour more. It's really about creating a base, building some roots, building your network, your professional network that's going to last your whole career and really sink your teeth in.
Yeah. And we also talked a little bit about how when life hands you lemons.
Yeah, that's really true. Like you have to build a foundation for your career. Like there's all this talk about work-life balance, and I don't believe that. Not because I don't believe that it wouldn't be an amazing, healthy way to live. Of course it would be. It's just life doesn't do that. You're going to do all this stuff in your life where you're going to need to focus on home stuff more than work stuff. And when that happens, you will have had to have built your base and your network of people that are there to support you. If you've been jumping around your whole career and you haven't really built a strong foundation and your employer doesn't really know you've only been there for a couple months and the place before that you were there for a year or whatever, you haven't built a strong foundation. And when life throws you lemons, it's just going to be you. It's not going to be you and your network of people that are all rooting for you and there for you.
One story that I have is the year that I got diagnosed with cancer, had a baby, I was out for 6 months.
Yeah.
Between all of the things. And I came back thinking, oh my gosh, this is going to put my career back. I ended up getting promoted the next 6 months later. And it was because people were willing to support me through that experience. They knew my work. And so having that network, to your point, is so important, and being able to demonstrate your body of work, just your resilience is incredibly important.
Yeah. And it's like, when you think about it, I love it on a very, very simple level. Like when we have projects going on in the studio and somebody else has some time on their project, when they raise their hand and say, how can I be helpful to you on this thing that you've got to get out the door today? Like, I have time. Little things like that. Those are like credits that add up to big lifetime credits. And it might not, I'm not talking about like with that person, but I mean like energetically in the universe. Like, you're putting that out and that is going to come back to you when you need it. And so that this idea of balance, like there are some days where work is going to need a little more, and there are some times when home is going to need a little bit more.
It's the work-life seesaw.
It's the work-life seesaw. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit more about the partner support, because I think you and I both have very similar situation where we've got incredible support from our partners. But tell me a little bit more about your situation.
Yeah. So my husband, Kevin, is staying home with our little one. He gave up his career in lighting and acting, and he's home with her now. That's a lot for somebody to do. And I'm like really grateful to him for doing it, because it's really allowed me to have space to do what I need to do. You know what I mean? Which is like run this whole thing and run around the country sometimes and I'm a woman, he's a man, I'm out running around, he's home taking care of the kiddo. I never thought in my life that I would have a partner that would be so okay with that.
Yeah.
And give up so much so that I could keep going.
Yeah. When I'm traveling, I get a lot of questions sometimes about like, well, don't you feel bad that you're not at home? And I'm like, no.
It's like, this is your one life. You know what I mean? Like, you can't give up the things that you're passionate about.
And she's going to grow up and see what you've done in your career and think she can do anything as well.
Yeah. I see her childhood and I'm like, wow, it's so magical.
It is magical. Yeah.
We have these magical little creatures, and I just want to support her to become whatever she's meant to be in the world.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah, it's really great. So I just don't want to get in the way of that. But also I know that part of not getting in the way of that is showing her by example what it's like to live with intention and passion of my own.
If you had to sum up your career in 3 words, what would that be?
Just getting started.
Amazing.
I feel like I'm still on the runway. I haven't launched yet. I don't know what the end game is exactly, but I know there's way more ahead.
What is the legacy you want to leave?
Oh gosh. There aren't many women that people really talk about. So I hope in 50 years when people are reviewing iconic title sequences and people that impacted and influenced design and culture, that I'm one of them.
You absolutely are, Erin.
Yeah.
And I'm very privileged to be sitting here with you today. So thank you so much, Erin, for taking the time to join me on Career Slay. Your story is amazing. I'm so inspired by you, and let's go do it.
Thank you for having me. It's been a joy.
The Career Slay podcast is a co-production of Career Slay and Wild Reply, produced by Michael Berg. Stay tuned for some great conversations on slaying the fear in career.